Alright, so this is a translation and discussion of Pliny's letter 727 that he is writing to the Senator Sura, in which he is discussing the nature of ghosts and phantasms and those sorts of things like that. So the first story that he is going to obviously have already brought up in the first two chapters is that of Curtius Rufus, a fellow who had obviously started out his life on the staff of a governor of Africa and ended up himself as a governor of Africa, as predicted by a phantasm, a ghost of some sort that had obviously been the personification of Africa and told him his future unfolding life. And so we start out now with chapters numbers 3 and 4 for this video. All of these things have been done. All of these things have gone down. Remember that facta sunt is not from facio facere, but for facio facere, its passive expression is going to be given by a whole nother verb, which as we all know is fio, fieri, and then of course factus sum. And so, since we are dealing with obviously a perfect passive expression, it looks as though it comes from facio facere feci factus, which of course shares the same fourth principal part with that third principal part of this weird, somewhat deponent-like verbs. All those things did go down, have gone down. Praeterea, in addition, or additionally, that same figure, which is our subject here, is said, narrator, from naro narrare, and here we then have a perfect infinitive, and so we're going to translate it to have verb. This verb is occurra occurre, which remember is going to be a verb that is originally the verb curro currere, to run, but we put a prefix on the front of it, compounding it, and thereby when it changes its meaning fundamentally to meet instead of to run, we now are going to have it take a dative object, which is exactly what we have there in the present active participle that is substantized, referring to Rufus himself. So, this same figure, additionally, is said to have met the guy going to Carthage. And so that would be the entry point into Africa from, obviously, sailing from Italy. So, to Rufus, or I should say, he is said, that same figure, she is said to have met the one going, Rufus, the one going to Carthage, que, and the one going out from gradior gradi gressisum, I should say present active participle from this deponent verb, going out from the ship, ablative, on the shore. He himself, meaning obviously now Rufus, having been intertwined certainly with disease, and since it is having been intertwined, I am somewhat inclined to believe that this might be cancer, but I'm just completely conjecturing. There is no obvious certainty for that. Certainly, having been intertwined with disease, having augured, having predicted the future. This is a deponent verb, which means that this is now going to be a perfect passive looking participle, and to augur means to predict the future. And so having augured the future things, the things about to be adverse, in other words, hardships that have been predicted by this ghost previously, with favoring things having been gone past. So in other words, when he is looking at his future, he's thinking about all the good things, which of course are the secundis praeterit, the things that have obviously he experienced already, all those honors he's received in Rome, the position of being the governor of Africa that he has now obviously been put in. Now he is obviously mixing that all together in his future predictions, auguring it with those future things that obviously were predicted by the ghosts that are adverse. And so, having augured the future things averse, with the favoring things having gone past, and here what we have is a literary device that is synthesis, interlocked word order, in which it is going to be A, B, A, B. And so interlocked word order is going to mean that obviously that the things that he is wanting is not going to be contrast, but interlocked altogether. He threw forth, he threw away his hope of safety. In other words, he is giving up. He is obviously accepting his fate because all the good stuff that that ghost had said would come to pass has come to pass, but now he obviously is accepting the fate that all the bad stuff is as well. And so therefore, having augured, again, the future things averse with the favoring things having gone past, he threw away the hope of safety with no one of his people, none of his family members, his own people, despairing. And so he's given up all hope, but his family not. And so therefore with nobody of his family, nobody of his people, of his own people, despairing, present active participle. And so therefore it is going to be that he accepts the fate that has been given to him by that original ghost. Now, starting in chapter 4, we have another example of a ghost story that he is going to give, which is going to involve a house that we are going to come to see. And so he changes subjects, he changes the narrative to, now, surely, so this is expecting a yes answer, this new story, and it's really that new story, but here, that is both more terrible, and so he's presenting another story that's going to be even more horrifying with a ghost, and no less miraculous, which I exponam, which I express, which I put out there as I have accepted it. In other words, he is saying, I'm not embellishing this story, that one, this new one as it were, which I am expressing, which I am placing out there, just like I have received it. And so therefore I'm just giving the facts as I heard them. I'm not adding, I'm not taking away any of the facts. It's just exactly as I've heard it. It is out there. There was in Athens, again a locative case. Because Athens is a city, town, small island, and it is plural, Atenae, Atenarum, for all plural cities, towns, and small islands, its locative is going to look like the ablative. And so therefore, here we translate, because it is locative, at Athens. There was at Athens a house, spacious, and so large and capacious. Again, just two words that means how large it was, but infamous and pestilent, meaning obviously filled with disease, decay, all that sort of stuff like that. And so, through the silence of the night, there was a sound of iron. And so therefore you can hear apparently these metallic sounds. And if you were attending, if you were paying attention, this being the process of a present contrary to fact, because it has obviously imperfect subjunctive. If you were paying attention, if you were attending more sharply, in other words, really listening, the sound, the ruckus of chains, more longly at first, and so therefore the sound is going to be thought to be at a distance, then a proximo, out of the most close spot, right on top of you, it returned. And so therefore, you have this house to where apparently through the silence of the night, you have the sound of iron, and if you were paying attention more sharply, if you were attending more sharply, the ruckus of chains, more longly at first, then right on top of you, from the most close location, it was returned. Soon an eidolon appears, another word for ghost, an apparition of some sort, appeared. An old man, this ghost, he, having been finished, conficio conficere, but here what it is going to mean is like having been worn out with thinness, with leanness. It's where we get the word emaciated. It's where you get the adjective machalintus, which means bony. So having been worn out with boniness and with squalor. With, ablative absolute, his beard having been not sent forth. This verb, mito, mitere, misi, misus, which of course you have here, it also can mean to let go. And so here, with his beard having been let go, in other words, it is going to be rough and unattended and all kinds of just out of control. It's not like he is grooming it, as it were. So, with his beard having been let go, having been sent forth, and with his hair bristling. And so capillos, we get the word capillary, these teeny tiny blood vessels that are like hairs, they are so thin. And so with his hair bristling, as it were, he's going to be a rather unkempt fellow. Nevertheless, he was wearing and he was shaking his shackles. These compedes are kind of like, shackles on his shins, on his legs, and he was wearing and he was shaking chains, katenas, on his hands. And so therefore apparently this figure is going to look all kinds of rough, kind of like a stereotypical homeless fellow might be, with all of his hair matted and all of his beard unkempt and all of his hair standing on end, and he is going to be obviously shackled both in his feet and with his hands in some sort of shackles or handcuffs, if you would so wish. So, nevertheless, hopefully you are studying and trying your best to make sure that you learn the definitions of these words and putting together what it says. But now we're into the midst of the second ghost story as offered by Pliny the Younger, and so this is going to be a haunted house with a haunted figure that looks kind of scary and looks kind of rough, an old man that is in a bad way, at least in his appearance. So keep studying. Thank you so much.